This information is brought to you by Charles Sturt University.
Hi. In this video, I'm going to describe some techniques for constructing good multiple choice questions. You've probably come across multiple choice questions many times in your educational careers. They're used in many quizzes in all sorts of contexts. They're actually quite hard to write. To write good multiple choice questions can take a lot of time, and if you've been doing the peer-wise assignments, you've probably found that it can be quite difficult to write multiple choice questions. Well, it's even more difficult to write good multiple choice questions. So in this video, I'm going to just introduce or describe fairly briefly the how and why to write multiple choice questions. Just starting with some definitions, here's a typical multiple choice question. The sentence that says the oldest rocks in Australia are found in which state, we call that the stem, and the other phrases or words there, they're the alternatives. Now only one of those will be the answer, and the others are called distractors, which I think is a good name for them, because that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to distract the person from answering the question from the correct one, so that they really demonstrate that they know their stuff. The corollary, of course, is that you need to know your stuff when you're writing multiple choice questions in order to write good distractors. But anyway, let's have a look at some principles of how to write good multiple choice questions. Okay, so the first thing you need to be able to do is to construct a good stem. Now, I'm just going to talk about some of the basic principles and techniques in order to avoid writing poorly worded or stems that are difficult to understand. So it's about getting clarity in your multiple choice questions to start with. All right. So the first thing you need to do is to make sure that the stem is meaningful and presents a definite problem. Now, what do I mean by that? Here's a multiple choice question. Which of the following is a true statement? And you're given some alternatives. The trend in the Earth's atmospheric temperature has been stable over the last 100 million years. The trend in the Earth's atmospheric temperature has been decreasing over the last 100 million years, and so on. Look at the stem. Which of the following is a true statement? Well, it could be referring to anything. So it's not really meaningful and doesn't present a definite problem. It's much better to reword that multiple choice question and reword the stem so that it looks like this. What has been the trend in the Earth's atmospheric temperature over the last 100 million years? Has it been stable, increasing, or decreasing? The clarity is much improved, and so try to think about that when you're writing your multiple choice questions, is to make sure that the stem itself is meaningful and presents a particular or definite problem. The next thing, the stem should not contain irrelevant material. So here's an example. The Earth's atmospheric temperature has varied over geological time, and recently increased carbon dioxide has caused an increase in temperature. That's not wrong, it's just irrelevant to the actual question. The actual question is, what has been the trend in the Earth's atmospheric temperature over the last 100 million years? So get rid of that first part and just keep it simple. Just keep the stem related to the alternatives that you are providing and to the question that you're trying to explore an answer to. Third part about constructing good stems, avoid negative phrasing, especially double negatives. You often find these in multiple choice questions, and they're really, there's no point to do it. It's just sometimes people who write them are trying to be tricky. Here's a good example. Which of the following is not true about the last 40,000 years? Temperatures did not increase and then decrease. The glacial maximum was not at 36,000 years ago. It's like, in fact, it took me a long time to write this question because even in my head, getting that double negative right so that it made sort of sense in a double negative sort of way took a long time. So just avoid them completely. There's no need for them, and instead write the question, which of the following occurred in the last 40,000 years? Temperatures increased and then decreased. The glacial maximum was at 36,000 years. Blah, blah, blah. Okay? Keep it simple. I should say, though, that even though I've said that's a good way to go, in this case, the stem doesn't describe a particular problem, but it's okay, and I should have said at the start, they're not always hard and fast rules. If it works, then sure, go ahead and do it, and the clarity will be okay. So I think in this particular question, even though the stem doesn't define a specific problem, which of the following occurred in the last 40,000 years? Well, it could refer to anything. But I think with the alternatives there that the clarity is okay for that question. Certainly with the double negatives removed, it is anyway. The stem should be a question or partial sentence. Again, it's not all hard and fast. Here are 3 examples of typical multiple choice questions expressed in a different way. During the blank, the glacial maximum was at 16,000 years ago. During which geological era was the glacial maximum at 16,000 years ago? The last glacial maximum was at the last glacial maximum at 16,000 years ago was during the. Now, all of those are fine, and you've probably seen those in any multiple choice exam or quiz you may have done. But for clarity, and to avoid people having to think about placing the alternatives in the sentence each time, which can create confusion, you're not after testing their ability to avoid confusion. You want to test people's understanding. And so the first one, try to avoid those. The other 2 are fine. Okay, they're complete questions, as in the middle one there, or they're a partial sentence that you just finish at the end. They're much clearer than trying to slot a word into the middle of the stem. All right, so let's have a look at how you construct effective alternatives. All alternatives should be plausible. So which of the following is a soil-forming factor? Geology, Beethoven, time, or spaghetti? No need for Beethoven and spaghetti, just keep it. They're obviously not plausible, so you're really only giving people the option between 2, and why not just have two answers? Sometimes you can look cute. Looking cute occasionally is okay, just don't make a habit of it. So better to say, which of the following is a soil-forming factor? Parent material, erosion, infiltration, or decomposition? Now, all of those are slightly plausible, and you need to know what I'm testing here is people's understanding of soil-forming factors as opposed to soil-forming features. I know that there's some confusion there, so I want to tease out and make sure people understand, can demonstrate an understanding of the difference between factors and, sorry, not features, factors and processes. All right, so make sure all of the alternatives are plausible. And this is where it becomes interesting when you're writing multiple choice questions, because to make them plausible, you need to have an understanding of the material. And this is where your learning comes in creating good alternatives and creating good multiple choice questions. Making sure they're plausible rather than just having Beethoven or spaghetti really tests your cognitive ability to understand the material that you should have read and synthesized in order to create a good multiple choice question. Alternatives should be stated clearly and concisely. This one's just asking what a definition is, and it's really not doing anything except exploring somebody's ability or ability in comprehension, or being able to remember that that definition was written down somewhere. So it doesn't really provide a good indication of somebody's understanding of the material that you're trying to explore. It shows that they've remembered a definition, which is fine, but a big wordy definition. So, you know, try and avoid those sorts of alternatives. Not saying you can't do it, I'm just saying minimize the time that minimize the number of questions that look like that. Alternatives should be mutually exclusive. This is one for clarity. So here's an example. When classifying a soil profile, which horizons should you try to identify? A, B, and C, or O, A, B, and C, or P, O, A, B, C, D, and R. Now the correct answer is the last one there, because they are all the horizons, and you should try is the important word there. You should try to classify them all. But of course, you should also try to classify A, B, and C, which is the first answer. So A, B, and C is encompassed within the third alternative there, and also the second alternative is also encompassed in the third one. So it's not clear they're very unclear alternatives. So you make sure that all your alternatives are mutually exclusive. There can be only one correct answer, unless the question says, tick what are 2 correct answers. Not that you would write a question like this for that possibility, but that's a valid thing too. You're allowed to say there are more than one answer, and you just let the person know in the question, in the stem. Alternatives should be free from clues about which response is correct. you don't want to give the game away, so you don't want to make it too hard, but you don't want to make it too easy. So it's important that the alternatives have grammar consistent with the stem. So watch out for plurals and is and are and a or an. Make sure each stem to alternative makes sense and reads grammatically correct, because if one of them reads grammatically correct and the other three are not grammatically correct, well, it's highly likely that the correct answer is going to be the grammatically correct one. So make sure you know your grammar. This is a cute one. Try and have alternatives that are similar in length. This often happens, I've noticed myself in writing multiple choice exams. The correct answer always seems to be the longest one. You just know that that's kind of obvious. So try and have them all about the same length. Use similar language, so either use all technical language or all non-technical language, because if you have a mix, then it's likely that the one that's different is likely to be the correct answer. And avoid the use of all of the above or none of the above. There's no particular reason to do it, apart from the fact that if a person answering one of your questions, let's say you have all of the above, and out of the 4 alternatives, they're certain that 2 of them are correct, then they don't have to worry about the other 2. They just tick all of the above, and they've got away with that question. So you can use it, and I use it quite a lot, but just avoid it, because what you want to do is test somebody's ability to know the correct answer, not be able to narrow it down to 2 and then get away with it. So just think about not using those too much. All right. Now, multiple choice questions. Sometimes they are rather simple and straightforward, and you're asked to answer very simple questions, but they can also be used to test some higher order thinking. Now, in any education, this diagram here and the philosophy and theory behind it informs the construction or the development of the learning materials that you undertake. Bloom's taxonomy describes different types of learning, different types of knowing. Down the bottom is the basic knowledge, or the aim of education is to ensure knowledge, and as you go up through these other types of knowing, you go comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Many multiple choice questions are down at the lower end, where it's focused on the recall of information, discovery, observation, listing, locating, or naming. And simple multiple choice questions do that. There might be some comprehension and not a lot of the rest that goes on, but when you're learning a particular topic, you want to be able to interact with that material at a deeper level, in which you can demonstrate application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, because it's at that level that you not only demonstrate your learning, but you have to undertake learning in order to achieve those forms of understanding. All right, so Bloom's taxonomy is a big thing in education, and whenever we write subjects, this informs much of what we do and how we present both the information and the assignments. But it's also relevant for multiple choice questions. So we've looked at a lot of knowledge and perhaps comprehension in just some examples I've given before. But what would a multiple choice question look like that tries to address some of these other levels of understanding? Now, to do that, stems that present, to achieve some higher order thinking, try to create stems that present a problem that require one of these. Application of broader course principles, so not just sort of definitions or lists of things or naming this and the other thing. Think about the broader aim of a particular topic and try and come up with a question that needs somebody to apply the broad course principles to an answer. Try and write a question that gets them to analyze a particular problem or evaluate alternatives to a particular problem, or something that requires multi-logical thinking, that is, thinking that requires more than one fact. Now, I've got one example of a question that would test higher order thinking, and that's this one here. You've been asked to measure the infiltration rate of a soil. The conditions at the site before you start the test are very dry and the soil texture is a sandy loam. Which of the plots is most likely to represent an ideal graph of the data over time? So this is assessing alternatives, but also evaluation alternatives, but also the multi-logical thinking that requires more than one fact. In this case, the person answering this question needs to, yes, understand what an infiltration rate graph looks like, but they also need to be able to integrate the fact that the conditions at the start of the test are very dry, and also that the texture of the soil is a sandy loam. You need to integrate at least those three things in order to be able to choose the alternative from the graph here. In case you're wondering, it's the red one. It's the orange one. Okay, so that's how you test upper high-level thinking. But the point is, for you, being able to write the question is testing your higher order thinking. All right? Doing these assignments is really about your learning, and yes, you can write simple questions, but if you spend some time writing some more complex questions, you will find that your learning is greatly advanced. And so in relation to peer-wise, yes, you can get the marks and the badges by writing those simple questions at the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy, no problems. You'll get the marks there. But the point behind doing these peer-wise questions is so that all of the material relates directly to your major assignment. And so if you spend some time constructing higher order questions by integrating information using multi-logical thinking, evaluating alternatives, you will find that you will learn much better, and you will learn the material much better, and you will be much better prepared when it comes time to writing your major assignments. All right? Now, I know that many of you won't do that because you press for time and you just want to get the assignment out of the way, and that's fine, and you'll deal with major assignment later on in another way, and that's okay. Peerwise is a new thing. It's only been around at CSU for 6 months or a year at most. Maybe down the track we'll start incorporating an aspect of evaluating students' questions and assessing them against that Bloom's taxonomy and giving more marks for the higher order level thinking questions. But at this stage, use it as a mechanism for you to learn more and to generate a greater understanding as well as addressing the assignment questions in peerwise. Okay, so I hope that helped a little bit.